I was a renowned gynecologist, published countless papers. But ever since I took on my husband's female student, every time I tried to publish a paper, I discovered she had already conducted the research ahead of me. This student would write papers identical to mine, nailing me to the pillar of plagiarism, and even stealing my position as head of gynecology. Meanwhile, I made repeated mistakes during surgeries, causing major medical accidents. I was fired by the hospital and held accountable by the patients' families. A patient paralyzed for life because of my error crawled into my consultation room and poured a bottle of sulfuric acid on me, leaving me a disfigured corpse. Yet even in death I couldn't close my eyes. I didn't understand why the female students' papers were always the same as mine. Nor did I understand why, though physically healthy, I would inexplicably lose focus on the operating table, leading to surgical errors. Then I opened my eyes and I was back to a time before my papers were published. Dr. Eliza, you're publishing a new paper again? Amazing! My colleague's praise pierced my heart like a needle. I was the head of obstetrics and gynecology at the provincial top-tier hospital. Besides seeing patients, I spent all my time in the lab, conducting research and solving complex cases. Every time I solved a complex case, I would publish a paper for medical professionals around the world to reference. These papers were based on my experiences and discoveries from practical work. Thus, those who hadn't participated in solving the specific complex cases could not possibly know the details and data. I looked at the completed paper on my computer, my heart pounding. It was this time in my past life when I, as usual, published a paper, only to be accused of plagiarism 4 hours later. To prove my innocence, I decided to reproduce the treatment method and show the committee that only I could perform this surgery, and that no one else could have written this paper. I found a patient with the same condition and paid for her treatment out of my own pocket. But on the operating table, I, usually healthy, became dizzy and frequently lost focus. In the end, I made a mistake that left the patient permanently paralyzed. The patient and her family cornered me in the consultation room, cursing and yelling. You clearly didn't know how to treat her. Why did you deliberately instigate us to have surgery? You ruined my daughter's life. Your paper is plagiarized. Someone like you is a disgrace to the medical field. You don't deserve to live. Kill her. This kind of scum has no right to be a chief physician. The partially paralyzed patient crawled to my feet and poured an entire bottle of sulfuric acid on me. My skin and flesh burned, crackling with sizzling sound. Recalling that soul-piercing pain, I could barely sit still in fear. My hands trembling, I opened the paper again, checking its contents. The treatment plan contained no similarities, the details were clearly my style, and even the patient's condition was unique. There was nothing wrong with my paper. It was absolutely impossible for it to be plagiarized. Dr. Eliza, it seems that your husband's student, Hazel Liu, also published a paper this morning. Hearing that name made me even more anxious. I peeked through the door to see Hazel outside. Hazel was a graduate student of my husband, Owen Wang, his only one. I had heard that she came from a remote mountain area, and her family was poor. My husband paid for all her tuition. Although Owen also specialized in obstetrics and gynecology, he lacked practical experience since he taught at the university. After helping Hazel publish a few papers, he couldn't help her further. Owen had come to me, hoping that I could become Hazel's mentor. He said that if I didn't agree, he would immediately divorce me, send our son back to the orphanage, and make sure I would never see him again. Owen and I had been college sweethearts. After graduation, one of us joined the hospital while the other stayed at the university. We were an enviable couple. But after we got married, I was diagnosed with infertility. After a few years of treatment, we had no choice but to accept the reality and adopt a son. Owen had always been resentful about this, feeling that our son had no blood relation to him, that he was an ungrateful wretch. He had mentioned divorce more than once, wanting to find a younger woman to bear his child. Afraid of affecting our son's mental health, I stubbornly refused a divorce. I had given all my earnings to him. I would turn a blind eye even when Owen was out partying. Owen used my son to threaten me, so I had no choice but to take Hazel in and teach her with all my heart. But Hazel was incredibly stupid, not even knowing the most basic medical knowledge. She was nothing like a medical graduate student. I thought someone like Hazel would be dismissed very quickly, but unexpectedly, she published a paper on her first day, gaining great fame. And the research object of her paper was a patient whom I had just cured. The hospital thought I was intentionally nurturing a student and gave all the credit for the research to Hazel. But I alone knew that I completed this research independently. Hazel didn't participate at all. Thinking this, I asked a colleague, "What is Hazel's research topic?" The colleague enthusiastically gave me a copy, which was Hazel's paper. I scrutinized it carefully, my heart sinking with every word. Hazel's paper was exactly the same as the paper I had just completed. I had been preparing for this paper for a long time. It was possible that it had been stolen. But the last paragraph of the summary was only written by me 10 minutes ago. And this copy of Hazel's paper was already circulating in the department this morning. In other words, anyone could think that I had plagiarized Hazel. But the research object of this paper was my patient. There was only one such case in the world. Hazel had just arrived at the hospital yesterday. How could she have written this paper in such a short time? And it was exactly the same as mine. What was going on? I hastily deleted the paper from my computer, forcing myself to calm down. In any case, I was someone who had died once. I would absolutely not let the tragedy of my past life repeat itself. I was the most talented student at the provincial medical university for the past 30 years. Medicine was as easy as pie for me. After graduation, in just a few years, with my excellent clinical response and medical skill, I had become the youngest head of gynecology at the provincial hospital. I had treated countless patients and solved numerous complex cases. All my knowledge and experience were in my head. No one could steal it. Thinking this, I regained my spirits. Having my paper stolen was nothing. I had countless topics to research, and an idea for a treatment model for a complex disease flashed in my mind. Afraid of my paper being stolen again, this time I didn't use the computer, writing furiously on paper. As long as I could produce a new paper earlier than Hazel, she would have no way of plagiarizing. After brainstorming the specific direction of the topic, several colleagues rushed into my office excitedly. "Dr. Eliza, Hazel has proposed a new topic. Its structure is brilliant. She is truly a genius." Hazel didn't even know basic medical knowledge. How could she have come up with a new topic in such a short time? "I don't believe that Hazel can propose a new topic. She doesn't have the ability." Seeing my outburst, the junior doctors looked at each other and left the office awkwardly. As they closed the door, I heard them whispering, "Is Dr. Eliza angry out of embarrassment? Well, Hazel is just a graduate student and she can write such excellent papers. Who wouldn't be jealous? Look at Dr. Eliza's envious expression. She probably will make things difficult for Hazel on this new topic, right? Humph, Hazel is Dr. Eliza's husband's student. If the student is brilliant, the teacher is too. Maybe Dr. Eliza's previous papers were stolen from her husband's research." Listening to these comments, I took a deep breath, my mind gradually clearing. Hazel's arrival was sudden. I haven't had the chance to really learn about her. The fastest way to get to know someone was by looking at their social media. Opening Hazel's friend circle, the first thing that caught my eye was a photo of her and my husband, Owen, with their arms around each other, smiling radiantly like a couple. The comments below were mostly praise. Hazel Liu is definitely the first talented woman in the medical university. 5 papers in 3 years, who can beat that? She really is Professor Wang's prized disciple. The relationship is so good. I heard that Professor Wang even bought his student a car. Hazel, be careful when you go to the hospital for internship. Professor Wang's wife is known to be a jealous old witch. If you are that talented, don't let her steal your experimental results. These comments contained a lot of information that I wasn't aware of, and my head was spinning. 5 papers in 3 years. That was definitely not what a student should have. A teacher buying a student a car? They definitely weren't just normal teacher-student relationship. I didn't dare to look anymore, my hand trembling, wanting to turn off my phone. The friend circle just happened to automatically refresh, and there was a new comment under the photo. "Don't worry, Hazel. As long as I'm alive, all of Eliza's research results will be yours. As soon as she dares to publish a paper, I will make her a complete plagiarism dog." I could no longer stand, falling to the floor. Luckily, that paper was not published, Or else I would have been nailed to the pillar of shame. My husband, the person closest to me, not only was suspected of cheating with a female student, but also intended to harm me. And I was busy treating patients. I didn't even know when they had hooked up. My previous patients included retired police officers and private investigators. I calmed down and found some people to investigate the relationship between Owen and Hazel. After finishing that, my phone screen refreshed again, and Hazel posted another message. New topic: independently leading a team. Private message if you are interested in joining. Along with this was a picture of a draft paper, with scribbles and sketches of a research direction that was still in its infancy. I turned off my phone and slowly looked at the paper that I had just placed on the table. Why did Hazel's new topic look so similar to the one I just conceived? Could it be that she had stolen my topic again? I didn't believe it. I picked up the paper and meticulously compared it, word by word. They were exactly the same. Hazel's content was the same as what I had written. Even the smudge marks were identical. But how is this possible? I was alone in the office, and I was the one who wrote it down using pen and paper. Was Hazel monitoring my office? Could she see everything I wrote? I nervously searched every corner of my office, but I found nothing. I was so engrossed in my search that I didn't notice Owen and Hazel standing before me. Seeing their bodies pressed closely together, my anger erupted. I walked forward wanting to pull them apart. But Hazel effortlessly dodged me. Dr. Eliza, I'm Professor Wong's student. Why are you so angry? Do you think Professor Wong and I have an improper relationship? I tried my best to suppress my anger. I almost couldn't stop myself from slapping Hazel in the face. Owen saw that something was wrong with me, and cautiously pulled Hazel behind him. Hazel and I just have a normal teacher-student relationship. Eliza, I warn you, you're not allowed to spread rumors and ruin Hazel's reputation. I sneered. Who said your teacher-student relationship is a problem? Hazel faked a pitiful tone. Dr. Eliza is so busy, of course she wouldn't care about my relationship with Professor Wong. Oh, by the way, Dr. Eliza, I heard that you are preparing to publish a paper. Why hasn't it been published yet? She had plagiarized my paper, and yet she still dared to come and show off in front of me. I wished that I could smash her arrogant face. But I couldn't. Hazel had published the paper first. Even if I said that she was the plagiarist, no one would believe me. I forced myself to calm down. The last topic had problems, so I abandoned it. I want some time to think quietly. You can leave. Seeing this, Owen snorted at me. Stop pretending. Who doesn't know what you are capable of? To be honest, it's not your research that has problem. It's just you being incompetent. Now that Hazel is preparing to do a new research, if you don't have anything to do, just come and help. Owen closed the office door and put Hazel's new research topic on the table. Hazel is kind-hearted and is willing to help a useless waste like you. Your name will be at the bottom of the paper, but only if this paper is completed as soon as possible. After Owen finished speaking, Hazel started to boast about how much the hospital valued her talent, how they gave her the greatest support, and how she was about to receive the honor of Outstanding Doctor of the Year. I didn't say a word, silently observing them. Perhaps my silence had rendered Hazel's boasting useless. After bragging for a while, she suddenly reached out and pulled out the paper that I had placed under my book. Oh, Dr. Eliza, why is this new topic the same as mine? Did you think I was too amazing, so you specially made a copy, preparing to study it in detail yourself? Hazel's voice became louder. Dr. Eliza, I know that you have many years of medical experience and network. If you really want to steal my research, you can definitely produce a paper earlier than me. But plagiarism is not a good habit. As a gynecologist, you don't want to be accused for this, right? She intentionally said that I was the one plagiarizing, and then self-righteously gave me a way out. How about this? For Professor Wong's sake, I will let you be a co-creator of this topic, but you have to come up with a specific research plan within a week. Otherwise, everyone will know that you secretly plagiarized a student. Hazel's words were full of sarcasm and arrogance, but I heard something different. The reason why they said so much was to make me quickly produce a research plan. If Hazel really had the ability to complete the research independently, they wouldn't have come to me today. And Hazel had already revealed the new topic. If I were to give up the research because I was afraid of having the same research topic, Hazel would have no way to plagiarize me. In other words, if I didn't agree to co-research, Hazel wouldn't be able to produce a specific research plan for the new topic. She would become a complete joke. Seeing my silence, Owen softened his tone. Eliza, alleviating patients' pain has always been your goal, and you can't bear to see that little girl whose uterus is filled with malignant tumors die like that, right? The little girl Owen was talking about was the research object of my new topic, a girl from a poor family. Her parents had given up on her a long time ago, leaving her alone in the hospital to wait for death. I felt sorry for her, so I applied for major disease research for her. Although this meant that she had to bear the risk of using new therapies, her medical expenses were all free, and there was a high chance of recovery, so it was a rare opportunity. Owen was actually using the patient's life to morally blackmail me. I clenched my fists in anger, forcing out a sentence through gritted teeth. I need time to consider. Owen smiled in satisfaction. Then do it quickly. Once you miss this chance, there is no more. Who else besides Hazel would be so kind to take you on to do research? Hazel also visibly breathed a sigh of relief, smiling as she held on to Owen's arm. Teacher is the best person. Teacher loves Hazel the most. Owen playfully pinched her nose. You are my most beloved student. Who else should I love if not you? Watching their intimate actions, I felt a wave of disgust. But at the same time, I was even more convinced of my thoughts. Owen and Hazel had long been in cahoots with each other. The person who was plagiarizing my papers must be Owen, my husband. While my thoughts were still racing, a private investigator faxed me Hazel's information. The affair between Hazel and Owen might be hidden in this information. As soon as I exposed it, Hazel would be fired, and I could take the opportunity to divorce Owen and keep custody of my son. They wouldn't be able to plagiarize my papers ever again. I took a deep breath and opened Hazel's file. Hazel's family lived in the mountains. When she was 14, she and her parents were in a car accident. Her parents died, but she didn't have a scratch on her body. Since then, relatives saw Hazel as a jinx, thinking that she would bring death to everyone around her, and they all distanced themselves from her. Hazel's family was poor, and after her parents died, she had no source of income. But unexpectedly, Hazel lived well on her own. In the remote and undeveloped mountain area, she had fruits and meat to eat every day. And the driver who killed Hazel's parents was a pauper, and could not pay any compensation. Gradually, the villagers all began to say that Hazel, who was so young, shamelessly seduced men for food. Although Hazel had not denied this, according to the information sent back by the private investigator, Hazel was surprisingly chaste. She didn't even bother to acknowledge the men, much less have relations with any man in the village. Even more bizarre was Hazel's academic performance. Hazel wasn't stupid, on the contrary, she had a bit of cunning intelligence, but she wasn't suited for studying. Since elementary school, she had always been one of the lowest-ranked students, incredibly dull. But during the high school entrance exam, she unexpectedly scored high. After entering high school, she rose rapidly. By the time of the college entrance exam, she had already ranked first in the whole school. Hazel was admitted to the medical university with outstanding grades. Because her hometown was the same town as Owen's, Owen took special care of Hazel and proactively funded her university tuition. Later, Hazel was admitted as a graduate student and became Owen's only student. Although Hazel's experience was bizarre, it was within the realm of understanding. Perhaps the government funded her meals, and she studied well in high school because she had suddenly realized that studying was her only way out. I didn't see the information I wanted to see. I called the private investigator to ask about the relationship between Hazel and Owen. The private investigator thought for a while before saying, "They just have a normal teacher-student relationship. Hazel is chaste and has never had any overly intimate relationship with Owen." I sent him a copy of Hazel's friend circle, which was full of the students' jokes, as well as the evidence of Owen buying Hazel a car. The private investigator said, "I've checked it out as well, there are indeed rumors at the school, but Hazel does not have an improper relationship with Owen. They only meet a few times during class, there is absolutely no contact in private." As for the car, Owen proactively asked to buy it for Hazel, but they are not intimate at all and do not look like lovers. I've obtained the surveillance video of them buying the car at the 4S shop. You can see for yourself. In the video, Hazel and Owen entered one after the other. Hazel only talked to the sales representative and completely ignored Owen. And Owen was like a loyal dog, obediently following behind Hazel. After Hazel had chosen the car, he went to pay the bill. They didn't talk throughout the entire process and did not seem like lovers. But just now Owen and Hazel had clearly acted so intimately. And other than coveting Hazel's young body, I couldn't think of another reason why Owen would betray his wife, betray his family, and steal my papers for Hazel. But if Owen didn't steal the paper, how could Hazel copy it so precisely? I felt even more confused. Before getting off work, a colleague who had a good relationship with me came to gossip. Did you know the hospital places great importance on Hazel, thinking that she is the second you, a second genius. So they promise that as long as Hazel publishes her second paper, they will promote her to deputy director. But the deadline is tight. When you entered the hospital you published 2 papers in a row, with an interval of only 1 week. So, the hospital leadership gave Hazel 1 week as well. If she can't produce a paper, she can forget about promotion and a raise. I suddenly understood. No wonder Owen and Hazel were so eager for me to join the research topic. It was because the hospital had set a deadline for her. Although I didn't know how Hazel could come up with the exact same papers as me before I did, I knew that those papers definitely originated from my brain. As long as I didn't participate in the project, and didn't write any papers, Hazel would have no way to plagiarize me. I asked for leave from the hospital's leadership. As soon as I got home, I took my son back to my parents' home in the neighboring province. During the first few days, Owen and Hazel called me countless times every day, urging me to go back and work on the project. I knew that without my participation, whether it was paper records or computer records, Owen would have no way to steal my papers and plans. Hazel couldn't plagiarize, so she panicked. A week later, I left my child with my parents and went back to work. As soon as I stepped inside, I saw that the department was brightly decorated, with a large banner that read, "Celebrating Hazel Liu's appointment as deputy director." My colleagues were surrounding Hazel, showering her with auspicious words and congratulations. I stared at it all in disbelief, stunned. I had clearly gone into hiding. Afraid of surveillance software on my phone, I had specifically changed phones and SIM cards. Afraid of surveillance at home, I had taken my parents and child on a trip. Afraid that my family might accidentally slip up, I didn't mention work or the project at all. Yet, Hazel had still written the paper and become the deputy director. My colleagues saw me, but none of them greeted me. Hazel stood amongst them, wearing a brand new deputy director badge on her chest, her eyes arrogant. "Dr. Eliza, you sure are having a good time. The department is so busy, but you go out on vacation. If you had come back a few days later, maybe the leadership would have directly appointed me as director instead of you." I guessed I must have looked very pathetic. But even at my most pathetic, I wanted to die knowing why. "You wrote a paper?" Hazel didn't even need to answer. One of her sycophants spoke triumphantly for her. "Of course she did. Dr. Eliza, do you think there are no other geniuses except you? Dr. Liu's paper has already been published in The Lancet. You can just be envious." How is that possible? The private investigator's report had stated clearly that Hazel often skipped class in college, and couldn't even grasp the most basic medical knowledge. How could she write a highly professional paper? I put on a serious face, asking someone to bring Hazel's paper. Hazel laughed. "Dr. Eliza, you don't believe me, do you? But open your eyes and take a look. Besides me, who else in the whole hospital could write such an outstanding paper?" She pretended to have a sudden realization. "Oh, that's right, besides me there's also Dr. Eliza. But Dr. Eliza has been out on vacation for a whole week. I couldn't contact you at all. You can't accuse me of plagiarizing you, can you?" I did my best to suppress my anger and took the paper from my colleague, examining it carefully. As I looked, my heart leaped into my throat. Although the phrasing was slightly different, the entire paper was almost exactly what I had envisioned. Although I was afraid of being plagiarized again and didn't dare write it down on paper or record it on the computer, I hadn't been idle this week. My brain had been working nonstop thinking about the project. The little girl with a uterus full of malignant tumors was suffering terribly. I really wanted to save her. The entire paper had been completely written in my brain. Unless Hazel could steal something from my mind, such an absurd thought made my body feel ice cold. When I write papers, I have a little habit that even Owen doesn't know about, which is I like to use awkward English. Some of the obscure words don't even exist in the dictionary, and only native English speakers would recognize them. Such English was present in Hazel's paper. And according to the private investigator's report, Hazel's English was poor. She could even misspell happy. The truth of the matter was clear. Hazel could directly steal the paper from my mind. That was why she could always produce the paper faster than me. Dr. Eliza, your face looks so terrible. Do you dislike me that much that you look like your parents just died when you see me? Hazel's mockery pulled me from my thoughts. I looked coldly at her, then suddenly laughed. I certainly don't like you, but I'm a straightforward person. Do you dare to make a bet with me? In 7 days, produce a second paper and let everyone in the department and the leadership judge. Whoever wins will be the director. Hearing this, Hazel's mouth almost split into a wide grin, her eyes looking at me full of pity, as if mocking my overestimation of myself. She agreed immediately. Sure. I also think being a deputy director is a waste of my talent. So, as you say, the loser can't go back on their words. That week, when I was at work, I thought about the meaning of work. When I was off work, I thought about what to eat and drink. I didn't even think about the paper at all. As the days passed, Owen couldn't help but urge me to write the paper. You have parents to take care of and a child to raise. If you really lose your position as director, who will provide for this family? I won't spend a single penny on that little beast with no blood relation to me. I looked at him with a sneer. Who are you going to spend money on? Hazel. Are you planning to have a child with Hazel? Unexpectedly, Owen refuted with righteousness. I'm not worthy of a beautiful genius like Hazel. I would never have such vile thoughts. I was very surprised. Owen came from the countryside, and he was a self-esteem-driven Phoenix man. I could not imagine that such self-deprecating words would come from his mouth. I responded vaguely, saying that I would write the paper, but in fact I didn't even think about the word paper. Another day passed, and Hazel couldn't sit still any longer. She cornered me in my office, mocking me. I heard from the teacher that Dr. Eliza hasn't written a single word for the past few days. My paper is about to be finished. Dr. Eliza, you were supposed to be a genius at the medical university. Can you accept losing to a little twit like me? I smiled and answered her. I can. Hazel's face turned ugly, her tone quick and agitated. If you lose your position as director, your teacher will definitely divorce you. Then that child you adopted from the orphanage, he'll send him back. Are you willing to let your son suffer? I was still smiling. I am. Hazel couldn't do anything about it and left in a fit of anger. On the 7th day, Hazel was visibly haggard. She came to my office for the last time, directly demanding that I admit defeat. I know you haven't written anything. You're afraid of me, Dr. Liza. You're afraid of losing too miserably. Hazel's face was twisted with madness. How about this? You voluntarily admit defeat and give up the competition. We can settle this peacefully. You can stay as director, and I can stay as deputy director. Will that work? I was really amused. Why should I admit defeat? Can't you admit defeat? Hazel suddenly became furious. You better know what's good for you. I'm discussing this with you because I'm showing you respect. Eliza, don't forget, your patient with the uterine tumor is now under my care. If you want her to live, then honestly admit defeat. Hazel was actually using human life to force me to admit defeat. I clenched my fists, anger boiling like lava. But I would never admit defeat. I could only settle for the next best option. Admitting defeat is not my style. I will go back and write my paper right now, but the time is too short. I definitely can't write something good, and I will definitely lose to you in the end. Don't harm that child. When Hazel heard that I would write a paper, she immediately smiled with satisfaction. You're smart to recognize the situation. I wrote the paper through the night. The next day, everyone from the department and the hospital leadership arrived. Hazel and I handed in our papers in front of everyone. You're doomed to lose. Hazel whispered to me triumphantly. Your position as director, all your achievements, as long as you are still doing research, Then all your glory will belong to me. Hazel probably thought she was going to win, so she showed off to me without any restraint. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too smart, too enviable. Once I have all your things, I won't be silly and continue to do research. I want to go to a private hospital. Wouldn't it be nice to make millions of dollars in salary every year? I smiled and nodded. Then congratulations in advance. At this time, the hospital leadership and the experts had finished reading my and Hazel's papers. They were whispering to each other, looking troubled. Seeing this, Hazel glared at me triumphantly and proactively asked, "Leaders, is something wrong? Has someone plagiarized perhaps?" Hazel gloated to everyone. "The thing that we researchers hate the most is plagiarism. If I plagiarize Dr. Eliza, or Dr. Eliza plagiarized me, please don't give us any face, just point it out." She was full of confidence, sure that I was the one who had plagiarized. Seeing that the leaders didn't respond, Hazel became even more energetic. "Don't be embarrassed, leaders. I admit Dr. Eliza's research ability is very strong. She has always been the backbone of the obstetrics and gynecology department. But the younger generation will surpass the old. We can't cover up her mistakes just because she is meritorious, can we?" Hazel was laughing unreservedly. Owen was also jeering in the crowd. "Although Eliza is my wife, I am ashamed to have such a wife. I hope that the hospital leadership will not take my feelings into consideration. Say whatever you need to say, and punish her for whatever mistakes she made. She deserves it all." Seeing this, my colleagues also began to gossip. "What does this mean? Dr. Eliza plagiarized?" Speaking of which, Dr. Eliza's research topics these past 2 times seem to have been taken by Hazel first. She has been acting so cowardly. If Eliza isn't speaking up, you all still don't understand? She must have plagiarized. I thought she was truly talented, turns out it was all plagiarized. Hazel was laughing even more gleefully. "Dr. Eliza, do you want me to beg for mercy for you?" I nodded with a smile. "Then I will thank you in advance." Hazel did not expect me to be able to laugh, and stared at me suspiciously. But soon her expression relaxed. She really did go to beg for mercy on my behalf. "Dear leaders, Dr. Eliza is getting older. It's normal to make a few mistakes. Just let her go home and take care of herself. Don't worry, the hospital has me. I will take care of everything, and I will not embarrass the hospital." After she finished speaking, the leader behind the table suddenly slapped his hand on the table. "Plagiarism is a huge mistake. The hospital will absolutely not tolerate such a rat." That's right. Hazel was full of schadenfreude. So she should just be fired. The leader stared at her angrily. "Then you're fired. Hazel Lou, you are fired." Hazel was stunned. "Leader, have you made a mistake? The one who plagiarized is Eliza. Why are you firing me?" But unexpectedly, the leader became even more furious and slammed the 2 papers forcefully on the table. "Eliza plagiarized you? I've never seen anyone get worse with plagiarism. The garbage you wrote is no match for a fraction of Eliza's work. How is that possible? I clearly copied it word for word." Realizing that she had said the wrong thing, Hazel quickly shut her mouth, picked up the 2 papers and compared them carefully. Even if she didn't understand medical knowledge, she could see that my paper had several more pages than hers. These were 2 papers that were roughly similar yet completely different. My colleagues all gathered around to watch. After circulating it around, they all praised my paper. Dr. Eliza's is written extremely well, and looking at Hazel's, although there aren't any obvious mistakes, it's confusing, written all over the place like an old lady gossiping, not a single useful sentence. So Hazel was the one who plagiarized. How could a recent graduate publish such a professional paper? So, the previous papers were also plagiarized from Dr. Eliza? Could it be that Owen stole Dr. Eliza's papers and gave them to Hazel? Could it be that Hazel and Owen have that kind of relationship? Disgusting. Hazel, provoked by her colleague's words, was red in the face. She suddenly went crazy and tore up both papers. Grabbing my shoulder, she shouted, "What exactly is going on? Last night, the paper you were thinking about was clearly my paper. Why is it that your paper is more detailed and better than mine? Did you hire someone else to write it for you?" Hazel, like someone grasping a last straw, desperately spread rumors that I hired a ghostwriter. But everyone present looked at her as if she were an idiot. The reason why I was called a genius was that I was the undisputed leader in this field. Besides me, no one could write a paper like this. Who would I hire to write it for me? Who had the skills to help me? I told Hazel with a sneer. Knowledge and experience are in my head, I don't need to think, I can write it directly. Last night, the paper I wrote was indeed Hazel's paper, but I stayed up all night without sleeping. At 4 in the morning, when my brain was the most exhausted, I perfected the paper by muscle memory. No thinking, no use of my brain. Hazel would naturally have no way to steal it from me. Although I didn't know what kind of evil magic she had used, a genius was a genius. The gap between me and her couldn't be filled with magic. No one believed Hazel, and they all looked at her with cold eyes. Hazel couldn't take this blow. The look in her eyes became extremely fierce. I became vigilant, guarding against her sudden attack. But unexpectedly, Hazel actually ordered Owen to attack me. Owen, hurry up and teach your wife a lesson. Even more bizarre was that Owen really acted like an obedient dog. With a blank look in his eyes, he rushed towards me. Luckily, my colleagues were all around me and they stopped him. But in the next second, Owen suddenly had a blank stare and fell straight to the ground. Owen was rushed to the emergency room. The doctor on duty suspected that he had a sudden cerebral hemorrhage which led to the fainting. They sent him to do a CT scan, and the results came out very quickly. Looking at the empty skull on the CT scan, all the doctors present fell silent. What's going on? Why is Owen's brain empty? The leader asked in horror. In the CT scan, only the bone structure of Owen's brain remained. The cerebrum, cerebellum, even the cerebrospinal fluid, had all disappeared. At this time, the nurse in the emergency room suddenly screamed loudly. Bugs! There are bugs! A black, soft, wriggling worm crawled out of Owen's ear. It looked similar to a fat snake. Everyone looked at this scene in horror. But the security guard at the door was more courageous, and he used a petri dish to trap the worm on the ground. The nurse screamed again. The patient is dead. The monitoring machines issued an ear-piercing alarm. Owen's heartbeat had stopped. Owen had died just like that. In the silence, the private investigator called me. I put it on speakerphone. Eliza, Miss Hazel's old neighbor, finally agreed to tell the truth after I paid him. According to him, Hazel's grandmother was bought from the South. She knew how to use goo, and that skill was passed down to women, not men. After the grandmother died, the goo bugs were inherited by Hazel. I heard that these goo bugs would burrow into a person's brain when they are a child and resonate with the mother bug in Hazel's brain, thus forming a connection between the brains. However, these goo bugs have a huge appetite. After eating a person's brain, they need to immediately find a new host. Otherwise, if the young bug is hungry, the mother bug in Hazel's brain would also become violent and then attack its host. The old neighbor said that after Hazel's parents died, many other people in the neighborhood had died. But Hazel, an orphan, was not only unharmed, but also lived better. They guessed that Hazel was using goo bugs, so they ostracized her. After listening to the private investigator, I understood everything. Hazel's money, Hazel's suddenly improved grades. The tuition that Owen proactively offered, Owen's obedience to Hazel. All of this was because Hazel was using goo bugs. Then what about me? Hazel had stolen my thoughts from my brain more than once. So that meant there must also be a goo bug in my brain. Thinking of this, I immediately had a thorough body scan. Fortunately, the bug hadn't completely entered my brain. It was just lodged in the ear canal. After the bug was removed, the hospital reported Hazel to the police. But Hazel had used some method to disappear without a trace. Just when I thought that she would get away with it, 3 months later, the news suddenly reported that a teenage girl with cancer had assaulted people on the street, pouring a bottle of sulfuric acid on innocent passersby. I looked closer and realized that the girl with cancer was the patient I had from the beginning, the one with tumors in her uterus. The girl cried during the interview. I could have lived. It's all because of that bitch Hazel, who plagiarized Dr. Liza's papers. She made me be assigned to her treatment group. She doesn't even know anything. Hazel not only worsened my condition, she also randomly gave me medicine, causing me endless pain every day. I hate her. And the woman who was lying on the side of the road, disfigured beyond recognition, was Hazel. Later I went to see Hazel. Hazel's entire face had been burned by the sulfuric acid, especially her mouth, which had been corroded to a shallow pit. In other words, Hazel would never be able to speak again, and her goo bugs needed incantations to control them. Soon, the young goo that had crawled out of Owen's brain starved to death. It only ate fresh human brains and no one could afford to feed it. Without this young goo, Hazel would have originally been able to control other young goo to burrow into other people's brains to feed the mother goo. But her mouth was ruined, and she couldn't chant the incantation. She could only watch her young goo starve to death, and her mother goo go mad. The mother goo wouldn't eat her brain, but it would make her hurt. It hurt badly. More painful than being corroded by sulfuric acid. I heard that Hazel tried to commit suicide every day in the welfare home due to the pain, but the mother goo's will to live was stronger than hers, repeatedly using her brain to stop her from killing herself. Hazel would spend the next few decades of her life in pain every day. But that was not my problem. I was still the brilliant head of gynecology. The only difference was that I no longer had a stupid husband. My son and I were much happier. It was also later that I learned that the reason Owen was targeted by Hazel was because he would seduce female students every year during the freshman orientation. He had even succeeded a few times. The girls were afraid and didn't dare to report him. One of them even jumped off a building because of it. At the end of the day, getting involved with Hazel was Owen's own karma.